What if the house you fall in love with today ends up being the one you struggle to sell later? Before you buy a home anywhere in Metro Atlanta, there are 8 types of homes Greg and I think you should think twice about, and one of them surprises almost everyone. If you're moving to Metro Atlanta or relocating to Georgia, this video could save you thousands of dollars, a whole lot of headache, and maybe even a little buyer's remorse. Hey y'all, I'm Jackie Hart, and together with my husband Greg, we are real estate agents helping families relocate to North Metro Atlanta area every single week. We spend our days touring homes, writing offers, negotiating inspections, and helping people avoid expensive mistakes before they happen. Now, before we jump in, let me just say this.
These are my opinions based on what Greg and I have seen over the years helping buyers move to Georgia. Every buyer is different, every home is different, and there are exceptions to every rule.
But if you were my family moving here, these are exactly the conversations we'd be having. So let's jump right into the first one. All right, let's kick things off with the very first red flag Greg and I see all the time. I like to call it the money pit house. Now, at first glance, this house might actually seem like a great deal. Maybe it's priced a little bit lower than the others you've been looking at. And you're probably thinking, wow, we're gonna get so much more house for our money. But before you start picking out paint colors, let's slow down just for a second. When Greg and I are helping buyers relocate to Metro Atlanta, we're looking past the pretty front door and asking one simple question. What's going to need replacing in the next few years? Because here's the reality. If the roof is at the end of its life, the HVAC is original, and the water heater has been hanging on for dear life since flip phones were cool, and the house still has the original paint inside and out, those aren't little weekend projects. Those are big ticket expenses, and they can add up really, really fast. Now, don't get me wrong, every home is going to need maintenance eventually. That's just a part of home ownership. If the roof is older but the HVAC is brand new, that's not necessarily a deal breaker. If the HVAC is older but the seller recently replaced the water heater, great. That's one less thing you have to worry about. It's when everything is reaching the end of its lifespan at the same time. That's when Greg and we have to start having a conversation with you, because is it really going to be worth it in the end? That's why we call it a money pit. So replacing one major system is manageable. Replacing 4 or 5 in the first couple of years, that can completely change your budget. And here's something people moving to Georgia don't always realize. Just because a home passes inspection doesn't mean you're not looking at several expensive repairs in the near future. A roof can still be functioning today, but be nearing the end of its life. The same goes for your HVAC, water heater, and other major systems. That's why we encourage our buyers to think beyond the closing table. Ask yourself, can you comfortably afford this home if you have to replace the roof next year? If the answer is yes, hey, fantastic. If not, it might be worth looking at another house where those major expenses have already been taken care of. Now, this is just my opinion after helping so many buyers purchase homes throughout the Metro Atlanta area. Every situation is different, and sometimes a home with older systems can still be incredible, especially if it's priced accordingly and the seller is willing to negotiate. The goal isn't to find a perfect house, it's to avoid buying a house that surprises you with a $30,000 repair bill before you've even unpacked the moving boxes. This is exactly the kind of conversation Greg and I love having with our buyers before they make one of the biggest investments of their lives. All right, red flag number 2, the house that has been flipped. Now, before I upset all the investors out there, let me be very clear. Not all flips are bad. In fact, Greg and I have shown some beautifully renovated homes where the workmanship was chef's kiss. Now, but we've also walked into homes where within the first 2 minutes we're looking at each other and we're thinking, okay, well, we know where they've spent all their money because you could definitely see it. You know exactly what I'm talking about. We're talking about the fresh white paint, brand new quartz countertops, fancy light fixtures, shiny cabinet hardware, maybe some luxury vinyl plank flooring. It photographs beautifully online, but once you start looking a little closer, you realize they gave the house a facelift instead of fixing what really mattered. The roof is still original. The HVAC is older than your college graduate. The water heater is hanging on by a thread, and don't even get me started on some of the paint jobs we've seen. Greg and I always laugh because sometimes you can literally see where they painted around the outlet covers instead of taking them off. Those are the little clues that tell you they may have been more interested in making the house look good than making it a quality home. Now here's where having a great real estate agent really makes a difference. One of the first questions Greg and I ask is, were permits pulled? If walls were moved, if plumbing was relocated, if electrical work was done, were those projects inspected by the county? Because permits mean someone other than the investor looked at the work. That's an extra layer of protection for you as the buyer. Another thing we like to look at is whether a licensed contractor completed the work. Now, sometimes it's hard to get those answers, but it never hurts to ask. And here's one that surprises a lot of buyers. Ask for the seller property disclosures. Just because an investor never lived in the home doesn't mean they shouldn't disclose what they know about the property. If they've replaced systems, repaired damage, or uncovered issues during the renovation, that's information you deserve to have. Again, this isn't about avoiding every flipped home. Some flips are fantastic, but Greg and I always tell buyers, don't fall in love with the pretty finishes until you know what's behind the walls.
I'm bathing it in this mixture using this I'm going to do that quite neatly. A little bit of time. Talk about art and politics. I like you.
A beautiful kitchen is wonderful, but I'd rather have a solid roof, updated electrical, and a properly installed HVAC than the prettiest backsplash in the entire neighborhood. Because countertops are easy to replace. Foundation issues, not so much. All right, here's another red flag that can be a little controversial. Homes that back up to or sit right next to a major power line. Now, before the comment section lights me up, let me say this. This is my opinion based on what Greg and I have experienced helping buyers relocate to Metro Atlanta. People have all kinds of opinions when it comes to power lines. Some buyers aren't bothered by them at all. Others won't even get out of the car if they see those giant transmission towers in the backyard.
Immediately no. Like instantly, I was like, yeah, no. That was my thought.
And honestly, that's exactly the point. Whether you believe there's an issue or not, future buyers have opinions, and those opinions can absolutely affect your home's resale value. We've had buyers pull into beautiful neighborhoods, see those large power lines, and immediately say, let's go to the next house. No tour, no walking through the front door at all. Decision has been made. Now, does that mean it's a bad house? Oh, no, not at all. It could be an absolutely beautiful home with an amazing floor plan, updated finishes, and a fantastic price. In fact, homes near major power lines are often priced a little lower than similar homes nearby because sellers know they have a smaller pool of buyers. So if you're planning to stay in the home for many years and it doesn't bother you, you could actually get more house for your money. But you have to remember that when it's time for you to sell, the next buyer may have the exact same hesitation. And that's something Greg and I always are thinking about. Here's the silver lining. Many of these homes have incredible large flat backyards because nothing can be built underneath those utility easements. So if you've ever wanted a space for a pool, a garden, a playground, or room for dogs to run, you might find some amazing lots. It's all about weighing the pros and the cons. At the end of the day, buying a home in Metro Atlanta is all about finding the right fit for your lifestyle and your budget. Greg and I just want to make sure you're thinking about today's purchase and tomorrow's resale, because while you may not mind those power lines, the next buyer might. All right, the next red flag. Let's move outside the house for a minute, because sometimes it's not the home that's the issue, it's the location. One of the biggest things Greg and I encourage our buyers is to pay attention to is whether the home sits on or backs up to a busy road. Now, if you're relocating to Metro Atlanta and you've only seen the houses online, this is something that is really easy to miss. The pictures look amazing. The kitchen is gorgeous. The backyard is peaceful. But then you pull into the driveway and you hear as cars fly by. Now, some people honestly don't mind it. If you're coming from a bigger city, it may not even bother you a bit. But for a lot of buyers, that constant traffic noise becomes a real deal breaker. And here's why Greg and I bring it up. We're not just thinking about whether you can live there. We're thinking about whether someone else is going to want to buy it from you one day. Because resale matters. If 10 buyers walk through that house and 6 of them immediately say, I love the house, but I can't get past the road, you just reduced your pool of potential buyers. And that can affect how quickly your home sells, and sometimes even the price. Here's a little tip. When you're driving through neighborhoods, pay attention to roads with double yellow lines running through them. Now, that's not always a bad thing, but many times it means the road has become a cut through for commuters trying to avoid traffic on the main roads. More traffic, more cars, more noise. Again, it's not necessarily a deal breaker, but it's something Greg and I have always pointed out to our buyers. Now, could buying a home on a busy road save you some money? Absolutely. They're often priced a little lower than similar homes tucked farther back into the neighborhood. So if you're someone who plans on living there for a long time and the location doesn't bother you, it might be a fantastic value. At the end of the day, this is just my opinion, but if I'm choosing between two very similar homes, I'm probably going to pick the one where I can sit on my back patio every morning, drinking my coffee, hearing the birds, instead of rush hour traffic. Trust me, future buyers usually appreciate that too. All right, this next one is especially important if you're moving to Metro Atlanta or relocating to Georgia, because it catches a lot of buyers by surprise. Let's talk about crawl spaces. Now, if you're coming from a part of the country where homes are built on slabs or full basements, you might be wondering, what in the world is a crawl space? Well, just like the name suggests, it's the space underneath the home that you can actually crawl through. It's where you can often find plumbing, ductwork, and other mechanical components. Now, before you panic, a crawl space is not a bad thing. In fact, there are plenty of well-built, well-maintained homes with crawl spaces all over Metro Atlanta. The problem isn't the crawl space. The problem is what's happening inside the crawl space. One of the first things Greg and I look at is for water. Has water been getting underneath the home? Is the ground damp? Do you see signs of standing water? Because where there is moisture, there's also a chance you might find mold, mildew, or even wood rot if it's been an ongoing issue. Another thing we pay a close attention to is whether the crawl space has been encapsulated. If you're not familiar with that term, encapsulation is basically a heavy-duty moisture barrier that is installed to help keep water and humidity under control. Personally, I love seeing encapsulated crawl spaces. To me, it tells a story. It tells me that the homeowner recognized a potential issue and invested money into protecting one of the biggest investments they'll ever make. And here's another thing. Since this is Georgia, we're no strangers to humidity, heavy rain, and the occasional critter. So don't be surprised if you spot evidence of that squirrel, of a mouse, or even a possum, or some other little visitor has tried to make themselves at home underneath your house. That's why a good home inspection is so important. Now here's the good news. One thing I actually like about crawl spaces is that if a plumber ever needs access to your pipes, They're usually much easier to get to than if they were buried underneath a concrete slab. So there are some definite advantages. The bottom line is this: don't let a crawl space scare you away. Just make sure you know what condition it is in before you buy the home. As Greg and I always tell our buyers, it's not about finding a perfect house. It's about understanding what you're buying so there aren't any expensive surprises after closing. All right, let's talk about something that can make even experienced buyers a little nervous: foundation issues. Now, before you panic, every time you see a little crack in the driveway or on the garage floor, take a deep breath. Not every crack is structural or a problem. In fact, small hairline cracks in the concrete are actually pretty common, especially here in Georgia. Concrete settles, house settles. That's normal. What Greg and I pay much closer attention to are the bigger warning signs. Things like horizontal cracks in the foundation wall, walls that appear to be bowing inward, doors that don't close properly, or evidence that a foundation has been repaired multiple times and is still moving. Those are things that deserve a closer look. Now, here's the good news. Finding a structural issue during your home inspection doesn't automatically mean you should walk away from the house. Sometimes it simply means it's time to bring in a structural engineer or a foundation specialist to take a closer look. We've had buyers purchase homes that had structural repairs completed professionally, and they've never had another issue since. The key is knowing exactly what you're dealing with before you close. And because we're here in Georgia, there's another reason we pay close attention to foundations: water. With all of our rolling hills and heavy rain, water naturally wants to move downhill. If it's not draining away from the home properly, it can put extra pressure on the foundation walls over time. That's why grading, drainage, gutters, and waterproofing are all the things we like to look at when we're showing homes. Now, I know this section sounds scary, but remember, this is exactly why you hire a qualified home inspector. Their job is to uncover these issues before they become your responsibility. And if something major does show up, that's when Greg and I go to work negotiating on your behalf. Maybe the seller agrees to make the repairs. Maybe they offer a credit at closing. Or maybe we decide together that this just isn't the right house. Every situation is different, and at the end of the day, this is just my opinion, but I'd much rather uncover a structural issue during the inspection period than 6 months after you've moved in. Knowledge is power, and the more you know before closing, the better decision you'll be able to make. All right, let's talk about the one that catches a lot of people relocating to Metro Atlanta completely off guard: is the too good to be true neighborhood. Have you ever been scrolling through homes online and thought, wait a minute, why is this house $75,000 less than every other house in the neighborhood? Now, every once in a while, you really do find a great deal, but more often than not, there is a reason. And sometimes it's not always the house. Sometimes it's what's around the house. This is where Greg and I can really help our buyers, because there are things you just can't tell from listing photos. That beautiful tree line behind the backyard, it might not stay a tree line. It could really be approved for another subdivision to be built, or maybe a shopping center, or maybe an apartment complex, or even a brand new road. Yay! One of the biggest mistakes we see people make is falling in love with the view without asking, what's going there? Another thing we always tell a buyer is drive the neighborhood more than once. Don't just come on a sunny Saturday afternoon, come back during rush hour. Drive through in the evening, visit on a weekday morning. You'd be surprised how different a neighborhood can feel depending on the time of day. Maybe that quiet street becomes a shortcut for commuters. Maybe that shopping center down the road creates traffic every afternoon. Or maybe you discover your dream home is right around the corner from the train tracks you never noticed during your first visit. Now, does any of that automatically means you shouldn't buy the house? Absolutely not. It just means you should know exactly what you're buying. One thing Greg and I always remind our buyers is this: you can change most about anything about the house, but you can't change its location. You can remodel the kitchen, you can replace the floor, you can paint every wall, but you can't pick the house up and move it to a different neighborhood. Well, you can, but it'll be really, really expensive. That's why location is one of the biggest factors we consider when we help buyers relocate to Georgia. Now, here's my favorite tip. If you really want to know what a neighborhood is like, roll down the windows. Take a slow drive through and listen. What do you hear? Do you hear kids playing? Do you hear someone, playing the radio? Do you hear constant traffic, neighbors walking their dogs? Sometimes your ears will tell you everything you need to know before you ever step inside the house. Again, this is just my opinion, but if a deal looks almost too good to be true, take a little extra time to find out why. Sometimes you'll discover it's an incredible opportunity, and sometimes you'll discover exactly why it's priced lower than everything else around. All right, I've saved my favorite one for last. And if you live in North Metro Atlanta for any length of time, you already know exactly what I'm going to talk about. Steep driveways. Now, don't get me wrong, some of these homes are absolutely stunning. They're perched up on a hill with incredible views, beautiful landscaping, amazing curb appeal. But then you pull into the driveway and think, am I buying a house or am I training for a Tour de France? Now, this is just my opinion, but Greg and I have literally had buyers pull into the driveway and look at each other and say, nope, before they even got out of the car because they can't even open up their car door. Here's why. When your driveway goes straight up a hill, it can be a little intimidating, especially if you're new to the area. You're trying to pull into the garage, but all you can see is sky until you reach the top. Backing out can feel just as challenging because your visibility is limited. And if you've got little kids playing outside or neighbors walking by, it can make some buyers a little uneasy. And if you have children, you probably also have soccer balls, basketballs, ride-on toys, bikes, and they're going all downhill. But here's the one thing that nobody talks about. Garbage day. Seriously, every single week you've got to drag those garbage cans all the way down that steep driveway. And after they're emptied, guess who gets to push them all the way back up? You. Congratulations. You just got your weekly leg workout whether you wanted it or not. Now, let's talk about the opposite, driveways that slope down towards the house. A lot of buyers immediately worry about water draining into the home. Now, that's a valid question to ask, but it doesn't automatically mean that you're going to have drainage issues. This is where a good home inspection becomes so important. You want to make sure the property has proper grading and drainage to move water away from the foundation. One thing I actually like about some downhill driveways is that if they level out near the garage, they can create a fantastic space for the kids to ride their bikes, shoot basketballs, or just play safe without everything rolling into the street. So, like everything else we've talked about today, there are pros and there are cons. At the end of the day, these are simply my opinions after helping buyers relocate to Metro Atlanta for years. The perfect house doesn't exist. Every home has compromises. The key is understanding those compromises before you buy, not after. If you're relocating to Metro Atlanta or anywhere in the North Metro Atlanta area and you're not sure which neighborhoods or which homes are the best fit for your lifestyle, Greg and I would love to help. This is what we do every single day, and we'd be honored to guide you through the process. Now, if you found this video helpful, don't stop here. If you've already decided that you're going to be moving to the North Metro Atlanta area, I want you to check out Canton versus Cumming or the Woodstock versus Alpharetta comparison to see which city might be a better fit for your lifestyle, budget, and priorities. I'll have both of those videos linked right here. If this video saved you from making an expensive mistake, do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let me know down in the comments which one of these red flags would be a deal breaker for you. I love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, that's your heart to heart with your favorite hometown realtors, Greg and Jackie Hart, and we'll see you in the next video.